Welcome back, everyone, to another week and another episode of Interventions and Detentions with your host, Brad. It's the podcast where we talk about real strategies, real leadership, real conversations that make schools better for kids and for educators. Today's episode is one that I think every teacher, administrator, interventionist, instructional coach, paraprofessional, maybe any adult working in education right now needs to hear. Especially at this time of year. It's winding down fast, folks. I think tomorrow for us will make 4 more days. So we're heading into the Memorial Day weekend coming up. Some of you are already done, which kudos to you, but we've got a few more days, and these can be the toughest days. I don't know that today's episode's topic is going to fix anything in the next 4 days, but there are things that you can put into practice tomorrow, next year, that might just help you along the way. We're going to call this the 10-minute fix, some small moves that can change classrooms. And I want to start with this truth, okay? Most educators are not failing because they lack passion. They're exhausted because they're trying to solve every classroom challenge with giant solutions sometimes. We often think things like, I need a brand new curriculum, or I need a perfect classroom management system. I need a 3-day professional development conference in Hawaii. Please take that anytime I can get it. I've never seen that yet, but anyway, it might be like, I need more time. I need students to completely change. But what if some of the biggest changes in classrooms actually came from tiny moves, okay? Things that don't really take a whole lot, tiny shifts. 10-minute fixes, small actions that can reset a room, small habits that improve behavior, small routines that can increase engagement, small moments that strengthen relationships. Research consistently shows that small, consistent actions have enormous long-term effects on student learning, school climate, and teacher effectiveness. In fact, educational researcher John Hattie's work on visible learning found that collective teacher efficacy, clarity, relationships, and feedback all have major impacts on student achievement, which is what we're after. And here's what's important. Many of those high-impact strategies do not require massive overhauls. They require intentionality. They require consistency, and often they require less than 10 minutes. So today, I'm giving you practical strategies educators can implement tomorrow. Not next semester, not after a curriculum rewrite, but tomorrow. We're going to break this episode into some sections like relationship builders, engagement boosters, academic quick wins, teacher mindset shifts, classroom cultural moves, and fast interventions for difficult moments. And throughout this episode, I'll share research stories, examples, and practical scripts educators can literally steal and use. So whether you're driving to school, checking us out, or sitting in your classroom prepping for tomorrow, walking the hallways, or maybe hiding in your office eating lunch in peace for the first time all day, this one's for you. Let's jump right in. One of the biggest lies in education is that improvement has to be massive. If you study elite performance in any field like sports, business, music, leadership, medicine, you see something different. Elite performers master small habits. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. Tiny habits repeated consistently create extraordinary results. And education's no different. Think about our classrooms for a moment. Sometimes one simple routine can change everything. Things like greeting students at the door, using something simple like wait time in your instruction, posting a visual agenda, a 2-minute reset, calling home to a parent with positive feedback, giving student choices, maybe a calm redirect instead of a public correction. None of those are flashy, but they work. The problem is that social media and education conferences sometimes convince us we need Pinterest perfect classrooms and more elaborate systems. Meanwhile, the highest impact classroom move may simply be something like, "Hey, I noticed you worked really hard today." That sentence can change a student's trajectory. Research from the Search Institute on Developmental Relationships emphasizes that students thrive when they feel known, valued, and challenged. Not when they're entertained every second, not when they're managed every second, but when they're known and valued and challenged. And often those outcomes come from tiny interactions. So let's get practical for a moment. Let's start with relationships, because relationships are the foundation of everything else in education. Students do not learn well from adults they don't trust. That doesn't mean teachers need to be entertainers, though we feel like it sometimes. It doesn't mean students have to love every lesson. But relationships create emotional safety, and emotional safety drives learning. Neuroscience tells us the brain learns best when it feels safe. Stress and fear, and maybe stress under fear, reduce working memory and attention. Connection improves engagement. So here are some fast relationship builder strategies that educators can implement right away. Here's one called the 2x10 strategy. This is one of the simplest relationship interventions ever. Spend 2 minutes a day for 10 days talking with a student about anything other than academic behavior. It could be sports, music, shoes, gaming, pets, family, food. You're communicating things like, "You matter beyond your performance, student." Research shows this strategy can significantly reduce disruptive behavior and improve student-teacher relationships. And here's the important part. You do not need perfect conversations. Students can tell when adults are trying, and that's all that matters. Here's one about positive narration. Instead of constantly correcting negative behavior, narrate the positive. Here's an example. "I appreciate how Table 3 got started right away. I noticed several people already have their notebooks out. Thank you for showing respect during directions." This works because attention is powerful. Students often repeat behaviors that receive recognition, and it shifts the classroom energy. How about 5 positive contacts per week? Here's the challenge. Make 5 positive parent contacts every week. Not because a student earned an award, not because they were perfect, but because they showed effort. A quick email, a phone call, maybe a text message. 30 seconds is all it takes, folks. And here's what can happen. Families will become your allies. Students feel seen and heard. Difficult conversations later become a little bit easier because the trust grows. One positive phone call can completely reshape a family's view of the teacher and the school. How about learn something personal? Learn one thing about every student. One simple thing. Maybe it's their favorite team, their favorite artist, their future dream, their siblings' names. Maybe it's their favorite snack. And then use it. "Hey, how'd that tournament go that you were in last weekend? Hey, did that new album of your favorite artist come out yet? Did your dog recover from that surgery?" That matters more than we realize. Connecting with them at a personal level. Here's one called the doorway reset. Greet students at the door. Very simple. Research from the Journal of Positive Behavior Interventions found that positive greetings at the door increased academic engagement and reduced disruptive behavior. And honestly, it changes the teacher too. Instead of starting class reacting to chaos, you actually begin your class intentionally. You make eye contact. You assess their mood as they walk into the room. You intercept problems earlier than later. You communicate things like, I see you, and I hear you. So let's talk about engagement now for just a moment, because one of the biggest complaints educators have right now is students are disengaged. And yes, attention spans have changed quite a bit. Technology has changed. Motivation has changed. But engagement's not about turning every classroom into a TikTok. It's about participation, ownership, movement, relevance, and clarity. Here are practical engagement strategies that can work for you. The 30-second turn and talk. After giving information for a few minutes, stop and say, turn to someone and explain the main idea. That's it. Research supports retrieval and verbal processing. Students retain more when they are explaining what they're learning. And engagement rises because students are doing something. Passive learning decreases attention quickly. Use many whiteboards. This is one of the best low-cost strategies ever. Every student responds, every student participates. Teachers get instant formative assessment on where their kids are at and what they know or what they don't know. And students feel safer because answers are temporary. You'll immediately know who understands, who's confused, and who's disengaged, instead of waiting until the test to find out. How about movement breaks? Brain research supports movement. Attention drops over time, especially for younger learners. I see it in our primary building every day. A 2-minute movement break can completely reset a classroom. Stretch, stand, partner walk, maybe a quick game, cross-body movement, even simple transitions improve student focus. We also know that choice increases engagement. Students are more engaged when they have some ownership. Not unlimited freedom, but structured choice. Some examples might be write or record your response. Read independently or with a partner. Complete questions in any order that you like. Choose between 2 project topics. Choice increases buy-in. That's it. You can also start with curiosity. Instead of doing something like, today we're learning about fractions, try, why do restaurants use fractions constantly? Or, how could understanding fractions save someone money? Curiosity drives attention. The brain naturally seeks answers. One of the strongest research-backed strategies in learning science is something involved with retrieval and retrieval practice. Ask students to recall information without any notes. Quick quizzes, brain dumps, partner recall, exit tickets. Learning happens through retrieval, not just exposing the material. Students often mistake familiarity for mastery, so retrieval reveals what they actually know. Let's talk about behavior resets for a moment and how that can de-escalate classrooms. We've talked about this earlier this year in some other episodes. All right, let's talk about behavior, because behavior challenges are exhausting us educators, okay? It wears us out. And here's the reality. Most classroom disruptions are not solved through punishment alone. All right, I've said it a million times. Well, probably 10 times, but I feel like it's been a million. I can't consequence the behavior out of a child. I know that they need a consequence, but it's not always going to fix the behavior. The consequence not. They are solved through prevention, predictability, connection, and regulation. Disruptions are solved that way. Now, like I said, consequences do matter, and they're necessity sometimes, but boundaries also matter. Accountability matters. And the best classroom managers are often proactive, calm, and consistent. Not loud, definitely not intimidating, but consistent. Here's one I like to call the private redirect. Public correction often creates power struggles between the teacher and the student. Private correction preserves dignity. Instead of saying something like, "Stop talking," try walking near the student quietly, use proximity, or maybe even say, "Hey, I need your help focusing." Or, "What do you need right now to get back on track?" You are correcting behavior without escalating the identity. Using a calm voice. Students often borrow the emotional temperature of the adults. If the adult escalates, the student's going to escalate. Calm is contagious. That doesn't mean passive, it just means regulated. One of the strongest classroom management tools is the adult having self-control. There's also something called the 2-minute reset, because sometimes classrooms just need a little reset. We need to stop, we need to breathe, we need to reset our expectations. And you don't have to force this through chaos. You can just take a pause. For example, you might say something like, "All right, everybody, let's reset. We're starting over. Let's take a breath. Eyes up here. Here's what we need." It's simple and it's powerful. Some students truly lack regulation skills. Executive functioning, impulse control, communication skills, emotional vocabulary, they just don't have it. That doesn't excuse behavior, but it changes our response as the adult. Instead of saying things like, "they won't," ask, "can they?" And if they cannot yet, then we need to teach the skill that they're missing. Consistent routines can also reduce behavior problems. Predictability actually lowers anxiety in kids. When students know how class begins, what the transitions look like, where the materials go, how to ask for help, what's going to happen next, their behavior will improve. Chaos increases behavior problems, plain and simple. I don't think anybody here would deny that if you've been in a classroom for very long. Clarity reduces the problems as well. This one really matters. Okay, don't win the moment and lose the student. Sometimes educators become so focused on immediate compliance that they actually damage the long-term relationships that they've built with kids. Not every situation requires a showdown. Ask yourself this in the moment: what outcomes do I want tomorrow? Not just right now in that moment. Now let's shift into instruction for just a minute, because teachers are under enormous pressure academically. We've got standards. We've got to show data. We got to get them ready for testing. If they're not doing well, we've got to come up with interventions. We've got growth targets. Let's see if we can hit them. And many educators feel overwhelmed. But again, small instructional moves can make a big difference. How about this very first one, having clear learning targets? And I do think this is important, and my staff would probably kind of rib me on this a little bit, because I do like to see learning targets. I do like to see teachers talking about learning targets, even with primary age kids. I think it's important. Students perform better when they know what they are learning and why. What I really love to hear is when kids can tell me the why. You know, when I'm in a classroom doing observations, and I used to say, "What are you doing? What are you working on today?" And they would say, "This worksheet or this math problem." But when I talked a little bit more about the targets, and "Can you tell me why you're learning what you're learning today? Why are you learning this?" It goes a little bit deeper. If I'm the teacher and I just say, "Do page 42, that's not very deep. But if I say, Today, we are learning how to identify the main idea because strong readers summarize information accurately. Wow. I think primary kids can understand where I'm saying there, and definitely elementary and junior, senior high kids can. Why can't we take it that step further and be a little more explicit in what we're learning and why it's important? Clarity improves focus. Frequent checks for understanding are huge in instruction. It's something that I look for a lot in my observations as well. We don't want to wait until the assessment to check their understanding. We need to use simple things like thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you understand? Thumbs up, everybody. Exit tickets are huge. Quick writes, whiteboards, taking a poll, partner explanations. Okay, explain this to your partner. Formative assessment changes instruction in real time, folks. Simple as that. We also have to work really hard to reduce the cognitive overload that we're putting on kids. Too much information at once is going to overwhelm them. We need to chunk instruction. We need to shorten up directions. We need to use visuals and give solid examples. We need to model instruction one step at a time, especially for struggling learners in our classroom. And if one kid is struggling, there's more than one struggling. So let's just break it down for everybody. And we need to give better feedback over student grades. Research consistently shows that feedback impacts learning more than the grade alone. Specific feedback matters. Instead of saying good job, which is nice to hear, let's try something like your evidence strongly supports your argument, or you organize your thinking clearly here. Students need actionable feedback. We need to normalize mistakes too. We need to let kids know it's okay to make mistakes, and that's how we learn. Students avoid risk when classrooms punish mistakes. Learning requires struggling, okay? Teachers can say, mistakes help our brains grow. Confusion means we are learning. Not yet is okay. Growth mindset language really matters in the classroom. I want to spend a few minutes talking about something called micro moments because sometimes educators really underestimate how much tiny interactions really do matter. A student walks in frustrated. The teacher smiles, or a principal notices effort. A coach leaves an encouraging note. The paraprofessional listens for a minute. The cafeteria worker says a student's name. These little moments build your school culture. Research on belonging shows students who feel connected to school perform academically and behaviorally. They perform for you. Belonging is not just built through posters on the wall. It's built through repeated interactions with kids. Tiny moments repeated consistently. And educators often really just underestimate the influence that they have. Students remember things like the teacher who checked in with them, the adult in the building who just believed in them, the principal who knew their name, the coach who noticed improvement, maybe the interventionist who stayed patient to work through the work with a student. Sometimes the biggest impact in education is invisible in that moment. Think about that for just a second. Let's talk about teacher mindset shifts for a moment. And let's just talk about educators ourselves. Because exhausted teachers and educators often think things like, I have to do everything. No. You have to do the right things consistently. Here are some mindset shifts that can reduce that burnout feeling. Let's talk about progress over perfection. Perfectionism destroys joy in education. It sucks it right out of us. Not every lesson has to be magical. Not every bulletin board has to look Pinterest perfect. Not every day will feel successful, okay? Focus on progress, not perfection. relationships before rigor, because rigor matters, but rigor without relationship often creates resistance. Students are going to work harder for adults they trust. We've said that several times. Consistency beats intensity. A small strategy repeated daily beats any kind of elaborate strategy used once. A calm routine beats random brilliance. Consistency builds the culture, folks. And regulated adults equal regulated rooms. Teacher emotional regulation matters. We've had a whole episode on that this year. This doesn't mean suppressing our emotions, okay? It means modeling regulation in the moment, breathing, pausing, responding instead of reacting. It's so important, teachers. Please focus on that. And you cannot pour from an empty cup. All right, let's talk about that for a minute. Educators are notorious for neglecting themselves. And while self-care has become a buzzword, the reality remains this. Burned out teachers struggle to sustain excellence. Rest matters. Boundaries matter. Support matters. Teachers, if you take anything away from today, take away this. You are allowed to be human. Please don't forget that. Let's talk about some quick classroom culture moves. A little more practicality here for a moment. Here are some rapid fire strategies that educators can implement tomorrow to help those culture moves in the classroom. Let's talk about morning mood check. Have students identify their emotional state as they're coming into the classroom. You could use a thumb scale, maybe an emoji chart that they point to, sticky note. We do the Inside Out, I think that's the movie, with the emotional characters, anger, joy, all those. They could point to those and tell you where they're at as they walk into the room. And this helps teachers proactively support their students for the day. How about a little music during work time? I used to love doing this as a teacher. Put some instrumental music on that can kind of calm and improve the classroom atmosphere. Not every class, not every student, but sometimes soft background music really does increase focus for folks. Celebrate our effort publicly, okay? Not just high achievement either. We need to celebrate persistence and growth, improvement, maybe even kindness and risk-taking. Use student names frequently. Kids love it when you call them by their name. Hearing your name builds a connection. Post visual agendas. Anxiety decreases when students know what's coming next, especially students with executive functioning challenges. You could put it on their desk, you could put it on the whiteboard or on your BenQ display, whatever you're using. Put that visual agenda up so they know what's coming next. It takes a lot of anxiety right out of their little minds. Build in processing time. After asking questions, simply wait. Use that wait time. Research on wait time shows longer pauses improve quality of responses. Some students simply need more processing time. Use humor, but use it carefully. Because humor builds connection, that's for sure, but sarcasm damages trust, especially for vulnerable learners. And teach expectations explicitly. Do not assume students know everything. We need to model it, we need to practice it, we need to reinforce it, and we need to reteach it. And for my administrators out there, what do you guys need to hear? Let's talk directly to you for a minute. Principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, district leaders, because if we want classrooms to improve, educator support does matter. Teachers cannot sustain excellence in survival mode forever. And sometimes leaders unintentionally create initiative fatigue, let's call it that. Too many programs, too many expectations, too many changes. Sometimes schools do not need another giant initiative. They really need things like more clarity, more support, more consistency, more coaching, more encouragement, and more focus. So here are some leadership 10-minute fixes that you can try. Leave positive notes. I hear this from my own staff. I love it when you leave a little post-it note on my desk of what you saw, or what something I did good. You noticed it and you left me a note. When you're walking through classrooms, leave encouraging notes for your teachers, but be specific and be genuine. Teachers rarely hear enough positive feedback. Ask your teachers, what is something that I can take off your plate? One of the most powerful leadership questions you can ask them. Support is not just adding resources. Sometimes it's removing the burdens. Help them out. Focus on high leverage goal. One high leverage goal for the teachers. Schools can improve faster when they focus. Not 15 priorities, just one or two that we can do really, really well. And protect your teacher time. This is a harder one to do sometimes in the moment, especially because we get wrapped up and we kind of just forget about it. But it's so important. Every unnecessary meeting matters. Can it be an email instead of a meeting? Every extra task matters. Our teacher time is precious, and let's try to be more cognizant of that. And principals, be visible. Be in the hallways, in the cafeterias, classrooms, arrival time, dismissal time. That little trait of being visible builds trust among students and your teachers. And be aware to regulate your building climate. Okay, adults borrow emotional temperature from our leaders. If leaders panic constantly, schools feel chaotic. Calm leadership matters. So why is it that these small moves can work and they can be such a big asset to your toolbox? We'll talk about the science behind it for just a moment. Why do these strategies really matter? Because behavior and learning are cumulative. Students are shaped by repeated experiences, and so are adults. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Habits shape culture. Tiny interactions create identity. A student repeatedly hearing something like, "You can do hard things." That repeated phrase over and over to the child, they'll begin to believe that. They begin believing in it, that they can do hard things. A classroom repeatedly experiencing calm routines becomes calmer. A teacher repeatedly practicing regulation becomes more regulated. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Education's not usually transformed in giant moments. It's transformed in repeated, ordinary moments. That's the beauty and difficulty of this profession. You often do not see impact immediately, but seeds are planted constantly. So I want to share a few examples because educators need reminders that small things matter. Here's a story about the student at the door. A teacher started greeting one particular student every morning. That student had significant behavior issues, frequent office referrals, defiance, anger. Nothing dramatic happened overnight, but over time, the student began to arrive earlier. They began talking more. They began participating more. Behavior incidents slowly started to drop and become less frequent. Why? It was a connection. It was the predictability, and it was the sense of belonging. Here's one about a positive phone call. A parent answered the phone expecting bad news. They usually do, right, when it's the school or the principal calling. But instead, this time, the teacher said, "I just wanted you to know your child helped another student today." The parent actually started crying when the teacher said this because nobody had ever called with good news before. That one call changed the family-school relationship in an instant. Here's a story about the 2-minute reset. The classroom was spiraling out of control. It was noisy. There was frustration and chaos. But instead of yelling, the teacher paused. Lights went down. some breathing practices started to take place. And then there was the reset. The students calmed down, and the lesson continued. Not because the teacher controlled harder, because the teacher regulated first. The most important question that we can ask through all this: what is one small move I can make tomorrow? We've talked a lot about all different strategies, these small little moves that you can put into place. But what's the one that you can make tomorrow? Not 20 of them, just one. Maybe it's that greeting students at the door. Okay, make a goal to do that tomorrow. Maybe it's adding a little more retrieval practice. Maybe it's using positive narration. Maybe it's shortening those transitions. Maybe it's one positive parent contact or breathing before responding. What's that one small move that you can do tomorrow? Because sustainable improvement happens gradually, and educators often underestimate compound growth. Tiny improvements repeated daily create enormous long-term outcomes. So I'm going to challenge you. Just do one. I don't care which one. Do one. So let's finish with a little rapid fire list. This isn't questions, rapid fire question time. It's rapid fire list that educators can write down now or implement tomorrow. All right. So if we're going to talk 10-minute fixes for relationships, here they are again. Greet students at the door. Use student names often. Ask one personal question daily. Make one positive phone call. Write a sticky note of encouragement to the teacher. Attend one student event. Use that 2x10 strategy. 10-minute fixes for engagement. Add things like turn and talks, whiteboards. Insert some movement breaks into the lesson. Start with curiosity questions. Add retrieval practices again. Offer structured choice and use visual timers. How about some 10-minute fixes for behavior? Here we go. Use private redirects. Practice those classroom procedures. Add calm reset routines. Reduce transition downtime. Reinforce expectations positively. Pause before reacting. And simplify your directions. Some 10-minute fixes for your academics. Clarify those learning targets for your kids. Use exit tickets. Chunk directions. Model examples explicitly. Provide actionable feedback. Reduce unnecessary workload. Build in processing time. How about some fixes for teacher wellness? Leave work on time once this week. Take a real lunch break. Maybe even ask for help and some support. Celebrate one success daily. Stop comparing yourself to others online. Protect your boundaries and remember why you started doing what you did way back when, first day in the classroom. As we wrap up this episode, I want to remind educators of something important. You do not have to transform everything overnight. Pretty impossible to do so. You do not have to be perfect either. You don't have to solve every problem this week or next year. Education is incredibly hard work. Nobody will understand that until they're in your shoes. And right now, this time of year, we're all feeling overwhelmed because the end is near, but it's not near enough. And there's lots of things to do in those 4 days or 5 days or 1 day. A calm response will matter. A greeting matters. Relationships definitely matter. Those resets, they're going to matter. Those positive phone call home to parents, it's going to matter to the parent, to you, and to the kid. The beautiful thing about schools is that tiny moments repeated consistently can literally change lives, people. It can literally change lives. That student that you encourage today, you may never fully know that impact. The classroom routine that you built, it may become emotional safety for a child in your room. The exhausted teacher that you encouraged, you may have helped them stay in the profession, believe it or not. Never underestimate these small moves, people, because small moves change classrooms, they change people, and those classrooms and those people are going to change lives as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining me again today and this week on Interventions and Detentions with your host, Brad. If this episode encouraged you, helped you, maybe gave you one little practical idea that you can use tomorrow, then share it with another educator, tell your friends, post it on social media, share it out. Remember this: you do not need giant changes to make a giant impact. Sometimes the best fix only takes about 10 minutes. Remember, new episodes drop every Friday morning at 8 a.m. on all your favorite podcast platforms. Tune in every week for new episodes of Interventions and Detentions with your host, Brad. Keep joining us. We got a few more weeks. Even when school is out, we'll keep recording for a little bit. And we'll probably take some time off for the summer, like you guys should too. That's always a good time to check up on other episodes and other seasons. So we're winding season 2 down. This is actually episode 2:34. Whew, crazy how fast it's gone. Take care, everybody. Hang on tight for those final days, and we'll be thinking of you right here on Interventions and Detentions. It's where the real learning begins. Have a great week, everyone.